profound impact in my life. We actually had the chance to meet several years ago in Canada. He got me running, and it's completely changed my life. He's still backstage because he's on crutches going slow. Let's give it up one more time for Ricky. And so, truly honored to be here. Love Colorado. True story, this is actually where I bought my second property ever. It was in Aurora, which is where we are right now, right? Aurora's like Phoenix, it's kind of everywhere, but my second property, bought it from the builder, brand new, put a renter in there for 6 years, collected cash flow, and sold it for a good profit. So this state has been good to me, and I'm excited to share a little bit of what I've done in real estate with you guys here today. But before I do want to give a shout out to the founders of Aspire. This is the largest, most successful business tour on earth right now. We have Eddie Wilson, Andrew Portal, Dan Flacer, put it together, and with 200 other people to pull this off. Huge round of applause for you guys. These are really important in our lives. In fact, my entrepreneurial career started off exactly like this. I went to a one-day business event. And for some of you in this room today, this will be a defining moment in your life. You will be able to look back at this day, years from now, as the day that everything started to change, when you started to win, when you were given the information that you then applied to change your life forever. See, there are people out there that just sit around waiting for someone or something to save them. And that's not how it works. We're only rewarded for taking action. And you guys are action takers. You're decision makers. You saw an advertisement or got an invite or someone told you to come here and check this out. And you guys came and you showed up. You're the type of people I love training. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Now, when Andrew was on stage earlier, just like the mom said, he talked about moving money. And I love that you guys remember he called it currency. And it's only called currency if it moves like the water, like the ocean. And in Andrew's talk, he focused on keep and protect. I'm going to focus right now on create. I want to talk about how the wealthiest 1% are creating wealth. You guys interested in learning a little bit about that, yes? When you pull out your pens and piece of paper, I do not have a ton of time, and write down these 3 words. Active income, passive income, and interest income. What we're wanting to do is not just create multiple income streams, but multiple revenue centers. I've heard it said a bunch that the average millionaire has 7 income streams, and I don't know how they calculate that or figure that out. But this is beyond income streams. You can have multiple income streams within active, within passive, and within interest. This is revenue centers. And so it's important for us who wants to learn how to move money to find the right asset classes to do that. Now, I have a favorite, and we know what I'm here to talk about. It is the longest, most tested, most monitored, most profitable asset class in the world. You already know what it is, right? Down to 2 words, it's real estate. It is an absolute fact that real estate has created more wealth in this country than any other asset class, period. Now, I know Dan Flacer, a good friend and business partner of mine, was up here earlier, and he was talking about stocks, and he was talking about cryptocurrency, and I'm not knocking those. I got plenty of crypto. It's been doing very well the last few months. I've got some stock, I've got that as well, but it is a statistical fact that real estate has created more wealth in this country than any other asset class ever. Guys, for human beings, there are 3 basic needs. Who knows it? It's food, water, and what? Shelter. I want to be in the shelter business. See, we don't know the future of cryptocurrency. We don't know the future of the stock market. For real, we don't even know the future of the dollar. It is getting hammered right now. But I know, long before any of us in this room were ever born, people were making money in real estate. And long after we're all gone, people will continue to be making money in real estate. It is why it's called real estate. It is a real asset. And so for me, I want confidence. I want comfort in knowing that I am focusing in an asset class that is never going to go away. No matter what happens economically, no matter what happens with currency, if we go to a digital currency, you guys maybe have heard some rumors of that on the internet. We're going to get ready to go and have a digital currency. There's all these conversations going on. Whatever it is that people are using, they're going to have to pay me to live in my houses, my apartment buildings, to store things in my storage units, to run their businesses out of my office buildings. Are you guys with me on this? Yes? And so it's important for all of us to have a general understanding or some knowledge around the most successful and the most profitable asset class in our world. Now, we're talking a lot about wealth right now, but like many of you in the room, I didn't come from wealth. I was actually a firefighter. God put it on my heart early to want to help people. As a young man growing up and following that calling, I was looking for a career where I could impact lives and get compensated for it. So I picked firefighting because I said, hey, if I can play with fire, save lives, and get paid for it, that sounds like a good match for me. And so I pursued it with all of my heart and soul, and I actually got hired by a fire department at 19 years old, and I thought that I would spend my 30, 35 years with that department and retire as a firefighter in my early 50s and live life on Easy Street. That was my plan, and then something Maybe some of you in here can relate. Maybe you guys have had a goal, something that you have sacrificed for, something that you have worked for, and maybe even achieved, and then something completely out of your control happens and completely takes it away from you. Can anyone in here relate to that? Anybody at all? That's a painful moment for a lot of us in our lives. Mike Tyson actually has a quote to that. He says, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And so for me, how getting punched in the face for me was this car accident right here. I didn't say this, but I live in Southern California, and my two best friends and I were driving from Orange County, where I live, out to Las Vegas, Nevada. And I don't imagine that a lot of you in here have made that drive, but it's all desert. It's nothing but sticks, rocks, and coyotes. And so while we were on our way out there, we were involved in a rollover car accident. It was a pretty bad one, and I actually got ejected out of the car. The speed limit out there is 75 miles an hour, so the estimate we were doing between 80 and 85, when I got thrown from the vehicle. Now, the first question that a lot of people ask me is, why weren't you wearing your seatbelt? I actually was wearing my seatbelt, but it was such a violent accident that I got thrown out anyway, actually out of the back of the car, right there where you would put the groceries. So you can imagine I sustained some pretty significant injuries. I had a traumatic brain injury. I had a spinal injury, and I was paralyzed from the waist down, how to learn how to walk again. And when the first responders found me on the side of the road, they didn't think I would survive in an ambulance. I was over 40 miles away from the closest hospital, so what they decided to do was close the freeway in both directions, true story. They landed a helicopter right on the freeway, put my body in it, and airlifted me back to the hospital. When I arrived, the trauma team didn't know if I would survive that first night because of my brain injury. I was bleeding on my eyes, my ears, my nose, and my back. You guys are all so serious right now. In case you're wondering how it is, I survived. Just so you guys know. You guys are like, well, what happened next? Well, here I am. But it did take a year of recovery. I lost my career as a firefighter, as I shared. I had to move back to my parents' house because I couldn't even feed myself. I had to learn how to walk again. I was blind one eye. It was a rough recovery, but praise Jesus, I did have a 100% recovery. My legs were great. Exercise. I even got my hands to back, so we're all good there. But in that year of recovery, I had to pick a new career. And I didn't focus on college. Remember, I focused on being a firefighter. And since I got hired at 19, I didn't continue going to school. I didn't have a degree to fall back on. So the only thing I decided to do was ask wealthy people how they were making their money. I was 21 at the time, and I had a limited access, of course. But my friends, my parents and friends, and just my network, I was asking what they were doing to make money. And it was really interesting. The one common denominator I could find around wealthy people was that they had real estate. They were either doing it full-time as an investor or a realtor or a broker of some sort, or they were doing something unrelated to real estate, but they were sticking their money in real estate. And I'll never forget the one conversation that changed the course of my life. I was actually at church, and I was talking to the dude that had the nicest car in the parking lot, because how else do you identify who's making it and who's not? And he told me he was a doctor. And in the conversation of me saying, I'm kind of starting over, what do you recommend? He told me something very interesting. He told me that he had bought his building that his medical practice was operating out of in Newport Beach, California, 10 years earlier. He ran his medical practice out of one of the suites, and he rented the other suites to other businesses and collected that cash flow. And he told me in the last 10 years that he had owned that building. From the cash flow and the appreciation, the building actually made more money than his medical practice did. This guy went to 12, 14 years of medical school, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on his education, but the freaking building made more money than he did showing up to work for, who knows, 40, 50, 60 hours a week for that 10 years. So I stood back and used my chin for a second, and I was like, maybe I'll skip the 14 years of college and the 300 grand in student loan debt. Maybe I'll just buy a building like this, or 2, or 10. And that's when everything started to shift for me. And so when Dan Flation was on stage earlier, he did talk a bit about inflation. And he was talking about how you have to do something. I was so proud that he said that. He said sitting on the sidelines and observing isn't an option anymore because you can't save faster than inflation is stealing. Well, one of the cool things about real estate, here's an article by Forbes that says that income-generating real estate is the best hedge against inflation. So for those of you that are in here, I know this is a business conference. This isn't necessarily a real estate conference. Some of you came to be inspired by people like David Goggins. Some of you came to learn business strategies like Dan Flation taught, the youngest founder of a publicly traded company. But all of us are going to want to consider parking our money in real estate just to hedge against inflation alone. Here's another article by Bloomberg that says that real estate is emerging as a hedge against roaring inflation. So by a quick show of hands, how many of you were taught to save for retirement in school or by your parents or whatever? Raise your hands if you were taught to save for retirement. Okay, basically all of us, right? It's impossible, as I just said, to save faster than inflation is stealing. Here's a chart that shows that. The green dollar is the value of our currency going down over time. The red line is how much money we're printing and putting into circulation. And you can see that it's a converse effect. The more money we print, the dollar becomes worth less. We print more, it becomes worth less, and worth less, until eventually it's worthless. Now, I'm not here to talk politics today. Personally, I think that politics divides, and honestly, I feel like politics divides intentionally. I feel that education unites. But when we look at this right here, we can all agree, regardless of who you vote for, that our politicians love printing money. Here's some proof of that. This is usdebtclock.org. This is a real website. I took a screenshot of it for the slide. If you guys are having an incredible day and want to ruin your day, go to usdebtclock.org. Not right now, because I want you to stay in a good mood. But it will actually calculate our debt in real time. The numbers will just be spinning right in front of your face. And at the time I took this screenshot, we were $34.4 trillion. We're now $34.6 trillion in debt. This is crazy. And especially for people who have been taught to save money, they are doing absolutely everything they can to make their dollars worthless. In fact, for the first time in American history, we are increasing our debt by $1 trillion every 100 days. It's freaking insanity. And so that's why I, as quickly as I can, want to exchange dollars for assets. Assets like real estate that we just got done saying hedges against inflation. A few more benefits of why I love real estate and why you will too. Number one, appreciation. Like that doctor said, as his building sat there in Newport Beach, it appreciated over time and made more money than his medical practice did. There are two types of appreciation. If you guys are taking notes, want to write this down. The first is natural appreciation, and that's what we all understand, based on supply and demand, because we can't make more land, and based on actual inflation and needing more dollars to buy the same things. Real estate over time has always gone up. It takes 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. There's a second type of appreciation called forced appreciation. Write that down. And it's one of my favorite parts of real estate. I can actually buy a PC junk house, fix it up, and make it worth more money. I can buy a PC junk apartment building, fix it up, make it worth more money, rent it up to a higher occupancy, and make it worth more money. I can buy the ugliest house on the street and make it worth more money. I can't buy Amazon stock and personally make it worth more money. Again, I'm not here to knock the stock market. I have plenty of stock holdings, but I can't buy Apple or Google or any of these stocks and personally do anything about increasing the value. But I can do that in real estate all the time. So we have appreciation two ways. The second thing is called depreciation. Now, for a moment, I'm going to talk to some of the high income earners in the room. You all know who you are. You don't need to raise your hands, because then everyone will hit you up for money on the brace. But you are high income earners in this room, and there's good news, bad news. Good news is you're making good money. Bad news is you've got soul-crushing taxes. The more you make, the more you pay in taxes. I'm going to use Eddie Wilson, one of the founders of Aspire, as an example. If you don't know it, he owned over 100 businesses. I don't know it exactly. It was like 120, 130 businesses. And he packaged up a few years ago about 70 and 80 of them and sold them all in a package for a $1.2 billion exit. Incredible success. He will actually be on the stage in like an hour or so. You're going to want to listen to every word he says and write down all of those things he says. But with a $1.2 billion exit, what comes with that? A huge tax liability. And so lucky for Eddie, he surrounds himself with successful people and really smart mentors, and they said, bro, you need to start buying real estate ASAP. So Eddie now today owns over 4,000 apartment units nationwide. He's actually one of the largest real estate investors in our country and doesn't even identify as a real estate investor. He identifies as a businessman. He loves buying businesses, scaling them up, and selling them. And what he did to offset his tax liability was buy real estate. It's one of the only cool things our IRS does, like maybe the only cool thing, is they acknowledge that over time, you're going to have to replace a roof. You might have to replace a parking lot, paint, carpet, appliances. So they actually give you deductions for that and say, hey, based on the value of your asset, over time, we're going to allow you to deduct this much money. And there are some advanced strategies of accelerated depreciation we don't have time for today, but that's what Eddie did to save some money. So for those of you that are here and you own an e-commerce business or you're making big money in your job, your career, whatever it is that you do, you're going to want to park money in real estate just for the tax savings alone. And then the third one is multiple income streams. What I love about this asset class is there's so many different ways to make money. We already covered the revenue sources of active income, passive income, and interest income. So right now, all of us should fit into one of these two categories. Some of you in here will want to be career investors. Let me just hear with a shout. How many of you would love to make the primary income source of your life real estate? Just give me a shout right now. What do you guys say? All right. for those of you that weren't shouting, you're going to want to consider being a passive investor. Continue to do whatever it is that's paying your bills right now, and park your money in real estate to get all three of those benefits over time. And so since we can agree that being an investor is important, and I love that Dan just called it straight out. He didn't say if you want to or maybe you should consider. He said you absolutely have to invest because of the way that our economy is going and inflation and what's happening to our currency. You have to invest to beat inflation. And so if we're going to be successful investors, let's just look at a few points that make successful investors so successful. Number one is that they understand and they use leverage. It's called OPM. What does OPM stand for? Other people's money. You got it. Really successful investors use OPE. Who knows what that is? Other people's everything, right? That's it. I'm going to use their money, their time, their resources, their teams, whatever I can to make a mutual win. And so let me just give you a quick example of leverage. Let's just say there's three people that have $100 grand. And $100 grand isn't important. It could be $1 million, it could be $10,000. It's irrelevant. Person A saves their money because that's what we've been taught to do since childhood. Again, all of us are taught to save for retirement. I would ask if Warren Buffett became a billionaire by saving or investing. We already know that. So person A, they just bury their money in a mayonnaise jar in your backyard. They save it, right? Now person B invests in an index fund, like the S&P 500. Dan was talking about that earlier. Has averaged just over 11% in the last 90-something years. That's great. And then person C, of course, invests in real estate. Well, let's fast forward 20 years and see what happens. I used an interest calculator. I used the actual returns of the S&P 500 from 2003 to 2023. I used the actual real estate returns, nationwide averages, to give us real numbers adjusted for inflation. So the person that saved their money, they did not invest it. And like Andrew said, they didn't move it. They parked it and they made it hold still. That by definition is what saving is. It's holding your money still. What do you think their buying power is? Of course, they still had $100 grand because they saved it. But 20 years later, what do you think its buying value is? Anybody want to take a guess? A little better than 5K. 65 is close. You said 60, not bad. It's actually $61,000 when adjusted for inflation. So if you're not understanding that, of course there's still $100 grand in a mayonnaise jar, but it can only buy what $61,000 20 years ago could have. It went down in buying power. That's why the middle class is struggling the way it is, because we're all taught to hold our money still and not move it like the wealthiest 1%. Now, person B invests in that index fund, as you know, it averages 10-11%. So in that 20 years, once adjusted for inflation, they got $382,000, not too shabby. But person C invested in real estate, remember, and they used leverage. What do you think their return was? Oh, just a cool $1.3 million plus appreciation, other appreciation plus 20 years of cash flow and depreciation. So even better than that. Now, how the heck did person C pull this off? Simple, you already covered it, it's called leverage. And instead of buying a house for $100 grand, they put $20,000 down on 5 houses and used OPM, other people's money, for the rest of that. Now, most of you who own homes that you live in right now understand that you put a down payment and the bank will give you up to 80%, and in some cases more than that. But who owns the house? You own 100% of it. You are on title, but they'll pay for 80% or more of it. And again, I know that here in Colorado, $100,000 doesn't buy you much of a house. Make it $1 million. It's just a mathematical example of leverage. So the question is, where are the best places to get other people's money? Here are some of my favorites. If you want to take a picture of this slide or write these down, one of the most popular, one of my favorites right now is subject to purchasing. A few years ago, interest rates were very low. Today, not so much. But what you can do is buy somebody's home and leave the existing mortgage in place, which is called subject to. You buy the property subject to the existing mortgage staying in place and take over their payments. Why replace their debt with new debt that's going to increase your payment because of interest rates when you can buy their house and just take over their payments as is? It's called subject to. The next one is traditional bank financing. You know, your 15 or 30-year fixed. We've got hard money for your fix and flips, private money. We've got bank loans and credits for your rehabs. And then we've got creative financing as well with owner financing, where they actually will create a note between you and them. These are my 6 favorite ways of creative financing. Guys, there are dozens more just like this. But they don't teach this stuff in school, do they? They taught me A squared plus B squared equals what? Why the hell do you know that? Like, who needs to know, what is it, the obtuse side of the triangle or whatever it is? But we didn't get taught creative financing. Super important. So number 1, they understand leverage. Number 2, write this down, they play the market. It is very easy to make money in any asset class that is going up. You just buy it, you count to 10, it's worth more money. But can you make money when it's flat? Or can you make money when it's going down? See, what makes a truly successful investor is they can make money regardless of what real estate is doing. So this real quick is an example of a real estate cycle. And now, this is one of the things that I love about real estate is its predictability. When we look back, real estate has done the same thing always since the beginning of time. It goes in about, give or take a few years, 20-year cycles. And so in the late 90s, we had an acute recession, we had the dot-com burst. I don't remember, I was like in grade school. But let's just say that the cycle started around 2000 of steady appreciation. You guys remember 2007, we peaked. We had the financial crisis, the subprime implosion, went over the cliff, all the way down to about 2010. Things slowed down, started leveling back out. 2012, things started to recover, and we had a nice recovery of steady appreciation until about 2020. That is a 20-year cycle. Does this look familiar to you guys? Yeah, we all lived through this. But then something crazy happened in 2020. We started printing money like crazy. We printed $11 trillion and infused it into our economy since 2020. We lowered interest rates at the Federal Reserve to 0. And we got paid to stay at home. You guys remember the whole social distancing thing? You weren't allowed to have friends or family anymore, but you got checks to stay at home. So what ended up happening with the cycle is it exploded in ways we've never seen before. And now real estate is at the highest levels it's been, and is at the lowest affordability index it's ever been. In fact, Zillow has this article right here that says to buy the same house in 2020 today, you need to be making 80% more money. How many of you at your job got an 80% raise in the last 4 years? Literally, it says that the income needed to comfortably afford a home is up 80% since 2020. This is unsustainable. This cannot continue. So two things will then have to happen. Number one, the government will get involved and create like a 50-year loan, right? So that we can lower our interest payments over that much more time, like a lifetime loan. Can you imagine getting a loan in your 30s and just pay off in your 80s? Probably not going to happen. The only other thing that is going to happen is it's going to go over the cliff and it's going to come back down. It cannot continue as it is forever. It is mathematically impossible. So there's only three things that real estate ever does, and there's three ways to respond to it. It goes up, it goes down, and it's flat. And then it'll go back up again. And it's important for us as investors to just know how to move our money the right way at the right time, depending on what the market is doing. Now, if you're taking notes, down there in the blue, that's called wealth creation. That is where you can buy assets for pennies on the dollar. I was buying bank-owned homes for 30, 40 cents on the dollar. Somebody else is buying bank-owned homes too? I love it. They're called REOs, real estate owned. That's where you can get cheap assets. What kind of assets? Cheap assets. The green section is called wealth acceleration. And the red section right there is called the transfer of wealth. Right now, we are entering the next transfer of wealth. And I don't know if you guys have been following this conversation. They are saying that this is going to be the biggest transfer of wealth in world history. Now, you guys might have remembered this from last cycle, the 2008 through 12 cycle. Your guys' equity in your house went away. Your guys' 401ks might have turned into 201ks, you know what I'm talking about. Where did it all go? Did it evaporate? Did it just go out to the ocean? No, it changed people. Warren Buffett from 2008 to 2012 tripled his net worth and the value of Berkshire Hathaway. So certain investors know exactly what to do at the exact time based on what the market is doing. Most investors in the red are going to lose. But some of us who have the right strategies know exactly how to invest our money and move it like Andrew said are going to win. How many of you want to win? Say I do. I do. Then it's just a matter of understanding the cycles. They never change. They're always the same. It starts off in a recovery. If you guys want to take a picture of this slide. Then it gets into expansion. That's where we've been for a few years now. And really we're in kind of hyper expansion. Then we reach the peak and we enter what's called hypersupply, where we start to see values go down, and then we end up in a recession. Not necessarily an economic recession, but a recession within real estate values. It does this again and again and again. So what I'm emphasizing is there's nothing to be afraid of. You just adjust your strategy accordingly. Real estate is like playing chess, not checkers. If the game changes, you just change your approach, you change your strategy, you don't get out of the game. But what's great about real estate, as I said before, is since we've been keeping track of it, in the long run, it has always gone up. Again, there are dips. 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. But real estate has always, since the beginning of time, as long as we've been keeping track of it, in the long run, gone up. So do I encourage you to invest in other asset classes and be diversified? Sure. as Dan shared with you, I invested in Everbowl, who was Jeff Finster's company. I do some private equity, I do all that stuff to have diversification. But real estate is my bread and butter because it keeps me safe. And it is the one thing that I know that I can give as generational wealth. How many of you guys don't just want to be wealthy, but you want to share your wealth with the people you love the most? Raise your hands real high and say, I do. Well, the one thing that's never going away is the need for houses. Again, it might change how it looks and how we're paying for it, but there will never be a day that we as a society decide we don't want homes anymore. We don't want to live in apartments anymore. We're all just suddenly going to live out in the streets and be homeless. There will always be value in shelter. And so, don't worry about what the market is doing. Respond accordingly and create exorbitant wealth. This is actually perfect timing that right now we are about to go over the cliff, and in certain markets already have, because the transfer of wealth can be yours. You can be a beneficiary of the transfer of wealth and not a contributor. Next thing that makes a successful investor is they understand the rules of the game. The game is very simple, and Andrew already talked about that. Money is a game. Real estate is a game as well. And what's cool about within real estate is there are different games you can play, but you just need to understand the rules. You might do short sales, you might do wholesales, you might do rehabs, you might do multifamily. Different games to play, but it's important to understand that there are rules to follow. And the number one rule of any game you're playing in real estate is know your numbers. Know your what? Know your numbers. What's the property really worth when you're buying it? What's its actual value? If it needs repairs, how much needs to get put into it? If you're going to own it for a while, what are your carrying costs? What are the expenses associated with owning that? And then the day that you sell it, what's it going to be worth, and how much profit are you going to make? These are the numbers that you must know to master the game of real estate. So let me just show you how I have an edge over my competition and how I use a tool that helps me predict numbers in the future so that I don't lose, so that I'm safer. Here's a house we flipped in Southern California. We bought it for $920,000, sold it for $1,375 after we fixed it up. This is what's called a profit calculator. And this to me is one of the most valuable assets I use in my business. I paid my accountants to make this for me. It's an interactive spreadsheet. I think I paid around $1,500, like 6 billable hours to have him make this. But what I do is I plug in all my numbers in advance, and it tells me exactly what the deal is going to look like. I tell it what I'm buying it for, what my contractor says the repairs need are, what I'm going to sell it for, how long I'm going to own it, and all the carrying costs associated with it. And it says, Cole, this is exactly what this deal is going to look like in advance. So I don't have to be scared. I can have confidence in knowing my numbers before I've even made an offer. So let me show you this deal in real time. It told me, based on what I plugged in, that on the house I just showed you, we would net profit after all expenses $117,000. Not bad for a flip. It told me